Okay, so previously in the last episode we found out there's an Arctic base in the Arctic. Well, no, it couldn't be really in the equator because it's an Arctic base, and that'd break all the rules of logic. So, I've discussed it with Spiritwolf, and we're going to deploy a fighter up there. We've just got to build one first. This will be the F-01. Right now we're building a non-armed version because we just need to make sure it flies first before we stick any missiles on. Now, little winglets on the side there to help it maneuver. Now they just look cool, to be honest. Okay, so now we just need to stick on landing gear, and then we can put this thing out onto the runway. So, in the last episode, I was completely stuck, but now I've got the Hot Rockets mod installed, and it makes everything look so nice, as you'll see here. Look at those engine effects, though. Tasty. Okay, so right now we're having a bit of difficulty lifting off, so we end up lowering, raising the landing gear just a little, but not enough so that we plow into the ground. So, straight off the bat, this thing's quite maneuverable, and we decide we'll fly it around, test its capabilities, and we decide to go for a little dive towards the R&D, and usually this would end badly, but then Jeb pulls up, and wow, that was very close. Instant replay right here. You could see the back winglet and the left wing's flap get ripped off. So if we were any closer, Jeb might not be alive today. But being Jeb, he successfully comes in for a landing, no matter how hard to control this thing is. Continuously wants to roll to the left, but he makes it, thanks to those little cosmetic winglets, if you know what I mean. So he lands it successfully. And now we get to work on the missiles. The missiles are a prototype. They work surprisingly well, though. We use a probe body core, so that we have SAS on those missiles, so it's a lot easier to fire at something, and they just don't go flailing about. So now it lifts off quite a bit easier because we moved the center of mass a bit further forward, so that meant we could put a lot more wings on, because towards the back, so that there'd be a lot more lift towards the back instead of being in the front. So those missiles were a resounding success. So now Jeb's going to hand over the F-01 to Chad, and Chad will fly the thing to the North Pole. So it's about a 10-minute flight with this, because it travels at about 1 kilometer a second, and when it's at 19 kilometers it travels at about 1.5 kilometers a second. Okay, so if you'll look below us now, this is the mountain range we crashed our satellite into at first. So now he's getting quite close, about 60 kilometers out, and Chad is beginning his approach towards the Hanlan base for a strafing run with the missiles. Okay, to be honest, I don't know my warfare vocabulary too well, so correct me if I'm wrong about strafing. Okay, so currently Chad is about 6 kilometers out. He's approaching fast. He's going in for a low strike, as he said. I think he ends up at about 35 meters above the ground. It's very low for a supersonic jet. Now, lining up carefully now. Doesn't want to hit the base with the actual jet, because this thing cost quite a bit of money. Like the satellite before we crashed it into the mountain range back there. And the firing mechanism failed for some reason, so Chad looks into it quickly. And he discovers there's an extra stage between him and the firing mechanism. So he powers up and he goes in for another pass. So he pulls up, and the idea of going for a dive bomb came to mind, but he decided not to, because the margin for error was a bit too small. Because if he made it, you know, he could crash. And if he didn't make it, he could crash. That sounds pretty small. That sounds like a pretty small margin of error to me. So, lining up for the base a second time. And missiles away? The missiles miss, but his right wing doesn't. And Chad flies onto the ground. Luckily, though, this is a simulator, so he tries again in the simulator. Lines up, practices this a few times before actually going for the real mission, because this is definitely not quick saving. Misses again. Tries again. Chad lining up the shot, base loading in, coming in low and fast once again, and missiles. Missiles away! And he misses. That's very anticlimactic. So here we go. Final pass. Missiles away. And direct hit. Looks like he got the control tower there. And possibly the living quarters. Okay, so now he has to make his way out of there as fast as he can with the fuel he has. So Chad, knowing that he's not going to make it too far, decides to ditch the plane to lower the actual likelihood that Hanlan will be able to take this technology and use it for their airplanes. So he slows his descent as much as he can, and he begins to glide. He gets out, and he rolls. Looks like it hurts. The Kraken might have something to do with his neck stretching as he rolls, but he gets back up because he's Chad, the second most badass pilot after Jebediah Kerman. So he checks the aircraft, makes sure that not too much technology is given away, just in case the Hanlan find this. The engines are gone. They're the most high-tech thing that was on the plane, so he decides he'll get an evac now. Just runs away as far as possible, just in case anyone saw him.